This video is sponsored by the Cubamajig Series 2 Kickstarter campaign. Today we got our first glimpse at Jumpstart Historic Horizons, and the set looks absolutely insane, featuring over 780 different cards, and including things I would never expect to see. Original dual lands, digital-only planeswalkers, and crazy new abilities.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The Magic Historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well. We are here to discuss Jumpstart Historic Horizons. We have been given our first batch of spoiler cards and information, and there is a lot to unpack. We have some awesome new cards, some crazy new abilities. So let's dive in by taking a look first at the tropical island, because this was an eyebrow-raising moment. When I saw this, I was like, wait a minute. Tropical Island has something there. The original dual lands from the beginning of Magic have something to do with Historic Horizons Jumpstart? How does that work, right? Because these cards are on the reserve list. You can't get them anymore. I mean, you can if you find somebody who has them and wants to trade them, but Wizards of the Coast doesn't print these anymore, right? So the idea that they are somehow included in Jumpstart is a pretty interesting one, but they are there in a somewhat limited capacity as part of one of the new abilities in Historic Horizons, all right? So the idea behind this, obviously, is these are very powerful lands that everybody wants. If you'll notice, it's a forest island that taps for a green or a blue and has some very inviting artwork. Like, legitimately, it looks like a place I would like to vacation. And I love the idea of being a planeswalker and traveling around the multiverse and being like, oh man, I'm going to spend some time here bonding with this tropical island so I can draw the mana up out of it. But here's the thing. You can't get Tropical Island out of any of the Jumpstart Horizon actual packs. So when you open them, you won't see a Tropical Island. You can only conjure up tropical islands. Now, we don't have a card yet that shows you getting to conjure up the tropical island. We've just been tantalized with the idea of conjuring, but it functions similarly to creating tokens. So what this does is it creates a tropical island card, it conjures it up, and it can put it directly into play or into your hand or anything like that, but it doesn't start out in your actual deck. And that's an interesting concept, and also a way for Wizards of the Coast to be able to play around with cards that exist on the reserve list, are tantalizing to players, to allow you to play with them a bit, but still kind of store them away, the same way they did with the Mox and the Ancestral Recall and all that stuff from a previous arena event. Maybe one day we'll have access to play with these cards regularly, but you won't have the ability to make these specific conjured only cards with wild cards, right? So it is interesting that Tropical Island will be available, but in a limited capacity under this new ability Conjure. And so basically the way it was presented is the Conjure could give you the option to conjure multiple different cards or just conjure as a side effect. We're going to have to wait for a little more information on the Conjure ability. So let's move onwards to the next card we're going to talk about, which features another crazy new ability from specifically Jumpstart Historic Horizons. This is the Manor Guardian. 1 black and 2 for a 4/3 demon. When Manor Guardian dies, each player seeks a non-land card with mana value 2 or less. So, seek is a tutor function, all right? So it's going to allow you to go through your deck. However, unlike every other tutoring effect, you're not doing it yourself. The game is going to do it for you, and it's going to do it randomly. So here's how Seek functions. Whenever you're supposed to seek a card, the game will randomly choose from all the cards that meet that condition and put one of those into your hand. So in this case, it's going to choose all of the cards in your deck that cost 2 or less to cast. It's going to pick one of those at random and place it into your hand. Now, this functions differently from tutoring in another way, in that this does not shuffle the deck afterwards. So when using Seek effects, there is no shuffle afterwards. If you've used cards that allow you to stack the top of your deck, the top of your deck will remain the same. So this is interesting in that it is a less reliable tutor that you can't use to shuffle your deck up. So if you don't like what's on top of your deck, you can't use it to get around that. You can't really guarantee yourself a particular card unless, in this case, for example, you made sure there was only one card in your deck that cost 2 or less, which might not be the best choice. But ultimately, it is an interesting variation on tutoring, and the idea that this demon, when he gets wiped out, is like, I'm just gonna sow some chaos. You know what? Everybody go ahead and get some random magic in your mind. I do like the fact that this is a demon that has been summoned up to guard some rich and powerful individual's home. Because look in the background, you can see their big old mansion kicking around there. It's got an Innistrad / kind of graveyard feel to it. Think about the kind of individual that would have demons guarding their home. I'll give you a hint. We'll probably be looking at them later in the video. So Seek is another very interesting style ability that theoretically you could try and emulate in physical Magic, but would be extremely difficult to do. These new abilities are more or less somewhat, you could randomize with dice and things like that. So these new abilities are somewhat imitatable in Paper Magic, but it would be difficult for most of them. There will be one card that they could just straight up put in Paper Magic, and I don't see any difference. But anyways, let's move on because we have more interesting cards to talk about. The next thing we're going to talk about is another crazy ability. Lumbering Light Shield has it. It's 1 white and 1 for a 1/4 illusion. When Lumbering Light Shield enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals a non-land card at random from their hand. It perpetually gains. This spell costs 1 more to cast. Now, perpetually means that it lasts for the entirety of the game, regardless of zone changes. So, whatever spell has its casting cost increased, that's permanent for the rest of the game. So if you reveal, let's say, for example, a creature from your hand, and Lumbering Light Shield makes you increase the cost of that creature by 1. Let's say you cast the creature, it goes into play, and then for some reason that creature ends up back in your hand. Either it was returned to your hand by somebody playing a spell that sent it back from the battlefield, or it went to your graveyard and you played a spell that returned it from your graveyard to your hand. Regardless, in either case, its casting cost is still increased by 1. This effect doesn't go away for the remainder of the entire game that you're playing. So this is an interesting ability that honestly doesn't feel like it needs to be digital only, but there is nothing really to tell you which of these cards is the one that has the perpetual added onto it. So let's say you had 2 copies of the same creature in your hand. Which one is the creature that has that perpetual cost increase? It is a lot more difficult to keep track of, and there would be ways to cheat around it. So I really like the idea of this perpetual ongoing sort of concept. That is a funky way of doing things. I admit that I don't really understand the connection between the artwork and the ability. I don't see how this golem illusion that shows up and shields townfolk from like a fire spell makes your opponent's spell cost like 1 more forever. I'm not 100% how that works because it looks like this spell is being cast and the light shield is protecting people. So I'll admit the flavor of this card is genuinely confusing to me, but the ability that it has is pretty interesting. Let us move on. We have Plaguecrafter's Familiar. This is another perpetual card. So 1 black and 1 for a 1/1 Death Touch rat. When Plaguecrafter's Familiar enters the battlefield, choose a creature card in your hand. It perpetually gains Death Touch. So wherever that creature goes, if it comes back, whatever happens, it will always have Death Touch. And I like that. It's basically like this rat is so infused with a deadly plague that once that plague gets into you, there's no escaping it. There's no way to cleanse the creature of that death essence. Now, obviously, it's in a controlled fashion, right? Because the creature itself isn't being destroyed by the Death Touch ability. But either way, I just love the idea of a plague that is so virulent that it just subsists, or it persists, I should say, across all bonds. That is a cool idea. And when you look at the artwork, man, imagine the actual plague crafter that's holding this rat. That rat is incredibly intense. You can see this toxic miasma coming off it, and it's got a wide open screaming, like I would not want this thing in my hand. But we have multiple instances of this perpetual ability. Now, this is the card I was talking about that I said could totally be printed in paper. This one doesn't feel like it has to be a digital only, but it is cool to me because it references Phyrexians and turning into a Phyrexian. So, 2 black for Subversive Acolyte. It is a 2/2 human. Pay 2 mana, pay 2 life. Choose one. You can only activate once. You can either make it a human cleric, and it gets +1/+2 and gains lifelink, so it becomes a 3/4 with lifelink, and then is also a cleric. Or you can have it become a Phyrexian, where it gets +3/+3 and gains trample, and whenever this creature is dealt damage, sacrifice that many permanents. So it's turning into a Phyrexian negator at that point, although the drawback is massive. Having to sacrifice a number of permanents equal to how much damage this guy takes is a very dicey proposition. But in certain circumstances, it could totally be a game changer for you, right? I mean, it's 2 mana and then only 2 more mana, and all of a sudden you've got a 5/5 trampler. So the cost benefit there could vary, but I just love the fact that this is literally a human who gets turned into a full-on Phyrexian. And you can see in the front, he looks mainly normal. Maybe in his face, he's a little crazy looking with that, like, I don't know if it's a scar or something else running along his face, but then you can see all these tentacles whipping out of his back, showing that he's more than he seems. But like I said, this could totally be done as an actual paper card with 0 problems. This isn't something that has to be digital only. So I'm guessing some cards are going to fall into that category, which I guess makes it easier for people who like to make their own proxies, because you won't have to worry about a lot of memory issues. And I expect that's what's going to happen with a bunch of these cards. If Wizards of the Coast goes, we're never going to make this available in paper, people will go, well, I guess I'll just make my own proxy then. So I said there's a digital-only Planeswalker. There's actually 5 digital-only Planeswalkers. We've got 1 in today's video. And obviously it's going to be davriel, because we got Davriel's Withering. Davriel is a very cool Planeswalker that was created outside of, basically outside of Wizards of the Coast by a famous author, Brandon Sanderson. So he actually wrote a short story, Children of the Nameless, and it's a great story if you haven't read it. That's where we first meet Davriel, and Davriel gets a new Planeswalker card. But before we talk about that, we're going to talk about Davriel's Withering, which is one of the better perpetual cards, I think. They're basically 1 black to give a creature -1/-2 perpetually is really solid. If your opponent has a frustrating little 1/1 or like 2/2 out on the board that you never want to see return, and they have a bunch of abilities to keep bringing creatures back by using Luris or other strategies, then you can just go, boom, there you go. You bring it back, it doesn't matter because it comes back with that minus, so the game will instantly send it right back to the graveyard. And what a terrible way to go. Davriel is sending out this necrotic essence from his fingertips that's flowing through the air and then entering in through this guy's eyes, nose, and mouth to wither him from the inside, right? Like, you can't see any outward signs of the withering. So it's all being done internally while he screams out. This is really intense artwork. So I bet you want to see Davriel. Let's talk about him. Davriel Soul Broker, looking very suave, very dapper. 2 black and 2 for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker, +1 ability. Until your next turn, whenever an opponent attacks you and or Planeswalkers you control, they discard a card. If they can't, they sacrifice an attacking creature. That is a pretty solid +1. Then you've got -2, accept one of Davriel's offers, then accept one of Davriel's conditions. And I have all the list of those. We'll go through those in a moment. And -3, target creature perpetually gets -3/-3. It's interesting to note that the most expensive ability is a larger version of the card that we just looked at. You can see in his hand, the same kind of essence is flying off, like he is ruining someone else. The setup, the office that he's in, looks like Liliana would love to do her professor role playing in there. I want to do some professor cosplay, Davriel. Come in, Liliana, if you accept my offer. you must accept my condition. So the idea of offers and conditions is the whole, like, I will give you a boon, but it will cost you. So let's take a look at the offers and the conditions. I have the list here. So the offers that you can get are draw 3 cards, conjure a Manor Guardian into your hand, and the Manor Guardian is the demon we saw at the beginning. Return 2 random creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. They perpetually gain +1/+1. Return a random creature card with the highest mana value among cards in your graveyard to the battlefield. You get an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+0. You get an emblem with spells you cast cost 1 black less to cast. You get an emblem with davriel planeswalkers you control have +2 draw card, which I think is really neat. Adding an extra loyalty ability, I was not expecting that. You get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. So you have a whole range of boons, right? These are all awesome abilities you can choose from. And it feels kind of similar to the dungeons from Dungeons and Dragons, where you have different options that are all kind of bred into this one card. Now, what are the costs? Because if you're getting these nice abilities, there has to be a significant cost. Well, these are the conditions. You lose 6 life. Exile 2 cards from your hand. If fewer than 2 cards were exiled this way, each opponent draws cards equal to the difference. Sacrifice 2 permanents. Each creature you don't control perpetually gains +1/+0. You get each creature you don't control perpetually gains +1/+0. Wait a minute. That can't be right. Is that right? Each creature you don't control. Oh, it gives them all a bonus. I read that as -1/-1 somehow. I'm like, wait, you give all your opponent's creatures negatives? How? Never mind. Make all your opponent's creatures permanently bigger. Oof. You get an emblem with creatures you control get -1/-0. Negative emblems. That's different. You get an emblem with spells you cast cost 1 black more to cast. You get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You get an emblem with, at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each creature you control. So you can see, these are big gains and big negatives. It's pretty funky. I like the fact that they literally go, boom, you want to? You can just summon up one of these Manor Guardians. Grab one up, knock yourself out. That is an interesting little idea. But anyhow, the concept of offers and conditions is a really neat concept for a black planeswalker that makes deals with devils and demons and literally just has big, powerful demons guarding his home. Like, it's so cool flavor-wise. I really dig davriel Soul Broker. This is a funky concept. So, that's all I have to say about Jumpstart Historic Horizons and the new spoilers. Let me know what you think in the comments below, my friends. It's time for the sponsor. So what exactly is a Cubomajig? Simply put, they are sturdy, reusable boosters that have amazing artwork from some of Magic's best artists. The purpose of a Cubomajig is to store individually your cube draft packs or your sideboard. You could use it for chaos drafts, for leagues, or even to separate your Jumpstart cards. The Cubomajig packs hold 15 double-sleeved cards, 20 single-sleeved cards, or 30 unsleeved cards per pack. One of the things that I most enjoy about the Cubomajigs is the way that they seal closed, making sure that they won't cause any damage to the cards inside. Series 2 of Cubomajigs brings some serious improvements. There is a new production method that allows for cleaner seams and stops the packs from bulging outwards. The Cubomajigs now come pre-made, so there's no assembly required. Each set of 10 Cubomajigs now comes with a 400 count box to store them in that can be used separately if you desire. The Kickstarter campaign also features the Potamajig, a bigger box that's designed to hold all of your Cubomajigs. On top of all this, the Kickstarter also features playmats showcasing the amazing artwork from these boxes, tokens with the same art, life pads called Jotamajigs, and also miniature pencils to use with them. There's also a series of sleeves that will feature this artwork, and they even have the original art available for sale. Now that you have all the information that you need, head on over to the Cubomajig's Kickstarter, because this pricing is a limited time offering. You'll find the link to take you there in the description below. My thanks to the Cubomajig Series 2 Kickstarter project for sponsoring this video.